Today I'm checking out the EES system or EE system at Masita, which is a place in Edium in Belgium, the Antwerp region, that has this system is a mix of systems that are supposed to speak to or act on subcellular systems and cellular systems. I'm going to do an entire breakdown on this of the science later in the video, so stay tuned. When people talk about the scalar energy, they usually trace the idea back to Nikola Tesla. Tesla didn't use the word scalar, but he explored the non-Hertzian waves, forms of energy that don't behave like normal electromagnetic waves. His experiments with longitudinal waves, zero-point fields, and wireless power became the loose foundation for what modern alternative energy researchers call scalar fields, the topic at hand today. So fast forward to today, and one of the most well-known systems built on this concept is the Energy Enhancement System, or EESystem. It was developed by Dr. Sandra Rose Michael, who combines bioenergetics, quantum field theory language, and Tesla-inspired principles. The system uses especially arranged computers and screens to generate a field of photonic, electromagnetic, and so-called scalar waves. In simple terms, the EE system is designed to create a stable, coherent biofield around the body, which, as we will explore in the video, your body has its own biofield, its own electromagnetic field. So the idea is that our cells operate electrically. Every cell has a voltage, every tissue has frequencies, and the nervous system is essentially a living electromagnetic network. When that system becomes chaotic from stress, toxins, or inflammation, the body's self-repair systems or mechanisms struggle. The EE system is meant to bathe the body in consistent, coherent field that helps restore this balance. So users tend to describe it as a deeply calming, grounding, and restorative experience. The theory is that when the nervous system relaxes and the cellular, electrical, or electromagnetic environment becomes more ordered, the body may shift into the repair mode, which means improved cellular voltage, faster recovery and detox, reduced stress and inflammation, better sleeping clarity, and overall energetic alignment. Because you already see that, as I'll explore in the video, that when your body's electrical charge is out of balance, you already have a misaligned state, or a electromagnetically, quote unquote, or like between parentheses, disorder state. So that is the key idea, right? That the body already knows how to heal, and that the scalar or coherent field technology simply provides the electromagnetic environment for it to do what it's naturally designed to do. And it's the owners of this place, Sita in Antwerp, or Edium to be precise, who came in contact with this system that wanted to afford people the opportunity to experience these relaxing and potentially healing benefits of this system. And their place has in their own conceptualization, they didn't want to just have the system alone. They wanted to build an entire integrated wellness space around it. So they have a yoga room, they have a very holistic food, it's not a cafe necessarily, but a space where you can eat, and they also serve drinks. So it's a very well integrated space where you have both the system, the yoga and meditation room, and then of course the cafe aspect to it. So Kevin and Britt really pulled it together, and now we're going to explore the aspects and mechanisms of the EE. So if we're talking about EMF, what is EMF? EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. And this is essentially the electromagnetic spectrum, like most of which is invisible to us, that is split into native, and then we're talking about the electromagnetic field of the Earth, everything else that comes down from us, from the sun, from space, any type of radiation, really, that also comes with that. And then everything that's non-native, and they were talking devices, right? Like the radio waves, the Wi-Fi, anything and everything that has an electromagnetic component to it. And all of our devices have these fields. We're immersed in them, from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth to radio frequencies and God knows what else. Another aspect of all of this, as we already talked about light, or at least mentioned it, is photobiomodulation. Effectively, photobiomodulation talks about the effects of light on tissues and or cells. So photo is the ancient Greek word for light, right? Biological modulation is effectively, you could kind of think of it like manipulation in this way. And you have different parts of the spectrum, like near infrared, far infrared, and all of them have different effects on, again, cells and tissues, right? Like green has a different effect than red does, than blue does. Blue tends to be stimulating, red tends to be downregulating. But again, like even in this, there's a lot more nuance and context, seeing that like red light can also penetrate through the skin. It tends to, let's call it, like energize mitochondria, or stimulate them rather. So the mitochondria, being the energy plant of the cell, also has more functions than just that, as it's also more complex. But that's a part of like how light influences your biology from a top down all the way to the bottom up, right? The bottom being mitochondria, cells, etc. When we open up a little bit more about these levels, or dig in a little bit more rather, then we have, for cells, we have the cell membrane, which opens these like channels, ion channels, for instance. You also have the mitochondria, which is actually a level below the cell. They're in the cell, that deals with all of the energy output. Then we have DNA transcription, DNA expression. These also get influenced by different levels of electromagnetism, and even our brain function in general works on electricity and magnetism, and the neurotransmitters are influenced by these as well. Seeing that the field, the electromagnetic field of the brain, is so much smaller than the electromagnetic field of the heart. So the electromagnetic field of the heart is quite large. It influences the brain. There's some bidirectional influence, but also like in your brain waves are an important part of this. So if you have, transcranial, the treatment transcranial magnetism, then that has changed brain function in people, or the way that they felt, right? That's a way to manipulate certain brain areas through magnetism alone, which is amazing, right? That tells us a lot about like, okay, this is what happens when your brain is exposed to certain parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? And again, that's important to understand in all of this. Another aspect of this entire premise is bioelectricity. Bioelectricity is essentially the innate electrical system and impulses that the body has, and that exists almost at every scale inside of our body and our biology. This book, The Body Electric, is a great book around this topic exactly, which is that's been written quite some time ago. So when I read that one, I was like, okay, this is very interesting. And that has everything to do with wound healing, but it goes way further beyond that. One of the major proponents of biophysics and bioelectricity, and as we see it in the modern landscape, is Michael Levin, a professor who has shown that you can alter the bioelectrical blueprint that a organism has. Some of the research that they did was in organisms, in worms, so small organisms, where they change the position of the ice just by changing the bioelectrical blueprint. So that's an aspect of also how things happen inside of the body. So there's a lot around that, like you even have biophotons, which is your cells giving off a light. So when all of these things come together, we know, right, that the electromagnetic spectrum, external and internal, have a massive amount of influence on our biology and thus how we feel and how things affect us, right? And I think that's a very important aspect to understand, and the understanding of this science in this field, because biophysics is still pretty fringe, is developing at a rapid rate, but it's putting things together that maybe we thought that functioned in a harmless way. Maybe it's not so harmless after all, right? Seeing that so much of our biology is dependent on electromagnetism and, for instance, bioelectricity, that tells us a lot about the importance of the dynamics between these. And what does this energy enhancement system do, right? So effectively, the idea of the energy enhancement system is taking the scalar waves, biophotons, and these other fields, so that these waves cancel out all of the other EMF that is present in the room, allowing your cells to effectively repair inside of the system, right? Then it kind of functions, quote unquote, as a closed system, if you want to kind of look at it that way, where when we take away all the other electromagnetic interference so that the body can just do its own thing, which that is the premise, right? This is the premise of how the energy enhancement system would work. In my estimation, there aren't any really good studies to confirm that this is indeed the case. So when it comes to the effectiveness or fidelity of the scalar technology, something that I would like to see is a way to test the potency. And like when I was thinking about it as well, like how would I do this if I was making a clinical study or something of the sort? I would use EEG, which measures brainwave changes. I would use ECG, which measures the heart rhythm, right? And then we could see like what your heart is doing in response to the technology. Maybe deeper blood work pre and post, right? So that you kind of focus or zoom in on certain markers, especially inflammatory markers. I mentioned reactive oxygen species, oxidative stress. That's inflammatory markers you can find in blood. And that would tell us something, right? So CRP is the main marker of this. So that's a big one, I would say. And then maybe there's other tools that could measure what is happening. I've read some of the research. There's different papers. I haven't seen any papers that mention this type of approach to testing this, right? Which is like, if we're going to find out what the effects are on people, then to me, that seems to be a very logical way to do this. So if we put all of this together, like, does the premise, like, it makes some sense? Yeah, it makes some sense. Is it working that way? No idea. Without the right tools to measure these things with it, both in the external environment as to what the system is supposed to do, and then in the internal environment of the person actually experiencing this thing, it's just difficult to say. Which, as technology develops, we see this very often, that things, like, effectively move faster than our ability to test it or measure it, or that things that have already been invented for quite some time, only much later down the line do we figure out, like, okay, these are the mechanisms of which it works. And a part of that is because of the technology in and of itself. Another part is it because the
funding generally, right? Like if somebody's going to fund a study, like who is going to fund a study on this? It's a good question, isn't it? So that's actually where we are with the result, right? In the premise, like a lot of the communication around this, let's say, has been organized or at least oriented towards healing. It's difficult to say, again, to what degree is the cellular system's healing in a sense. Like, does repair kick in? I mean, repair kicks in when you're in rest, right? So that would be a good thing. But to what degree is it because we are eliminating all of this like non-native EMF is at this point, I think, impossible to say. Do I think it has merit as a way to get people into, let's call it a forced relaxation, right, between quotes? Yeah, in that regard, I think it's great, right? If this is a way for people to take a 2-hour break on whatever basis to effectively relax and they get into deep relaxation, which my aura data, I have an aura ring confirmed. I'll put it up on the screen so you see that my heart rate dropped and that I just fell asleep, which is great, right? I was that relaxed. So that tells us something, like, and I've seen this in different ways, that people that also have a hard time effectively getting themselves to like meditate or do breath work, right? And this is another good angle. It's like, okay, you've booked a 2-hour session, you've paid up front, you're going to do this thing. Like, what else are you gonna do? Then relax. And maybe the benefits is just found in this alone. Um, so that's never a bad thing in my opinion. So these are my thoughts around it. There's so much more in terms of the entire field of biophysics and quantum biology, bioelectricity. I can link some books below. I can link some people that also deal with a lot of this in the comment section, or rather in the description section. And then I'll leave the rest up to you guys. So when you have an experience with this system, please let me know in the comments.